Hi there. I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back for more conversations. We have a terrific show for you today. With us is Carolyn Hirsch. Carolyn Hirsch is called by Variety magazine the First Lady of Funny. Carolyn Hirsch in 1981 founded Caroline's on Broadway. She was the first woman to found a comedy club. She will tell us all about it, where she featured such rising stars as Jay Leno, Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, and Rosie O'Donnell. We are pleased to welcome Carolyn Hirsch and the World of Funny to the program. Carolyn, hi, thanks so much for doing this. It's really wonderful to be with you. Why don't we start by telling us a little bit about your background, where you went to school and where you came from, and then lead up to how you formed Carolyn's Club, Carolyn's on Broadway.
I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to City College and I went to Fashion Institute. I opened in 1982 in Chelsea on 26th Street and 8th Avenue. Then later on moved to the Seaport in 1987, and then moved to my current location, which is on Broadway between 49th and 50th. And I've been in that location for over 28 years. And it was a great move when I moved up to the Times Square area. It was kind of the beginning of what was happening in Times Square. And I'm very proud to say that I was there before the mouse was there.
Before the mouse. So to your knowledge, are you the first and only woman to start a comedy club?
No, actually, there was a lady who has just passed away, Mitzi Shore, who ran the Comedy Store in LA for many years. And she was probably one of the first. I followed her many years later after that. But the first in New York City, yes.
Certainly the first in New York City. So let's go back to the beginning. Was there a particular difficulty in starting a comedy club as a woman in New York?
You know, I've been asked that a lot of times. It's always about, I was so naive to the fact that I always thought that I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I never said, oh, I'm this woman opening up this comedy club. What I did do was, there were lots of showcase clubs in New York City. And I was kind of the first club around in the United States that started to pay comedians. My first comedian that I hired and paid very nicely for the weeks that he was there was Jay Leno, followed by Jerry Seinfeld, followed by Sandra Bernhard, followed by Billy Crystal. So I was trying to create this grown-up nightclub in New York City, which in 1985, the New York Times called us the first grown-up yuppie nightclub in New York.
And you developed all that talent. Now, where did you find the talent? I mean, suppose I wanted to start a comedy club. I'd need a headliner. Where would I find them?
In the early 80s, David Letterman went on the air. And David Letterman had a morning show, and I was a big fan of his. And then he went to 12:30. So we kind of started to book a lot of the comedians, a lot of the young comedians that were on David Letterman's show. So when I did hire Jay Leno, he would come to New York, he would do Letterman, and he said he would say, I'm at Caroline's, come out to see me. And that set up for us a national platform around the country where people knew about Caroline's.
So your shows have all been stand-up shows. They haven't been sketches or situation comedies, have they?
Yeah, well, we do basically stand-up, but we've done other like sketch comedy shows. We've done lots of different shows at Caroline's.
What stand-up comics have you been featuring whom you like the best?
Oh, that's a tough question.
You like them all. You wouldn't have picked them.
I like them all. I don't have any favorites. You can see how the years of how different groups, we started with the Jay Leno, Jerry Seinfelds, and then went to the Jon Stewarts of that era. And then we're on to the next era of young comedians like Jabuki Young White, the Sarah Coopers right now, that are all coming out of the improv world also, that also work at Caroline's. So it's been 40 years. So we've crossed the span where a lot of the younger people today, the Jon Stewarts were fans of the the Jay Lenos. There were 10 years difference there, and as we go along, we see a whole new group of young people coming up, and we see many more women doing stand-up comedy today than when I first started the club. That's
about what percentage of your performers are women?
Well, I'd say it's a good 25%, which it was when I started, but there are so many more people doing stand-up comedy today, and there's just so many more women and so many good opportunities for women to do that. Comedy is a very aggressive art form, and it really was more male oriented, but now as women have, populated and come to the club over the years, and comedy is more available to themselves, you see many more women doing it. It's so aggressive. We call when you're on stage, I either killed or I died. So it's an art form that's pretty aggressive, and females have proven that they're really good at it too.
How about women of color? You feature many women of color?
Well, I've always featured people of color. To me, it has never made a difference. I'm only about talent, and I'm only about good talent. And Caroline's has always been promoting urban comedy, Black American comedy. We've always promoted comedy, and I've always promoted women. And clearly I've done that for many, many, many years.
Can you define comedy for us? What is comedy?
Well, I think comedy is when you can take all of the mundane elements of life and put the spin on it, and then try to you put the spin on it to make people laugh. I think it's taking just ordinary circumstances that are the most funniest things in the world. It's about being in a room when somebody tells a joke. Why we laugh is because it all happened to us. We're all in the same community. And I think that the best joke tellers find that little thing that we all relate to. And that's what makes us laugh, because it happened to me. And that's what makes us laugh.
Well, Steve Martin was one of your early performers, I think. And he quoted as saying, comedy is the art of making people laugh without making them puke. Now, why is that funny?
Oh, no. People laugh because they feel good.
Feel good.
That's why people want to go to clubs to laugh. It just makes them really feel good.
So Mel Brooks said, tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall into an open manhole and die. Then you laugh. Why are you laughing?
Funny.
Why is it funny?
It's funny.
Why does that make us laugh?
I don't know. Because I think Mel Brooks said it. That's why.
Is it because of its absurdity?
I think so. It's absurd, but it's not. But comedy isn't always absurd. That is the thing. I think that, one of the most brilliant minds in comedy is Larry David. And everything Larry David does, it's really not absurd. It's really what he's thinking. And he's got the nerve to say it. And I think that's what makes us all relate to him and makes us laugh about, what he does, and makes us feel better.
Well, Lenny Bruce had a definition. He said the only honest art form is laughter, comedy. You can't fake it. Try to fake 3 laughs in an hour. You can't.
It is one of the emotions you cannot fake. You cannot fake.
Can't fake laughter.
You can't fake laughter.
So why has comedy become so inherently ethnic? I mean, you'd agree that it is ethnic in so many respects.
Yeah, I think, there was an explosion in the early 90s of Black Americans doing stand-up. Now, the very interesting part of that is this came from Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy was on Saturday Night Live in the 80s, and there were a group of young men and women who watched Eddie Murphy on Saturday Night Live and really said to themselves, hey, I could do that too. I'm funny. I can do that kind of stuff. And it created this whole movement of African-American men and women that then went on the stage. And it's so funny because I've been working on a project about this movement that you just mentioned. I think it's very interesting. I think it was a time where it took a lot of young men and women off of the streets that might go on to sell drugs and they really put their brain to work on doing stand-up comedy because they really admired Eddie Murphy, and he was really a game changer in the whole community.
Well, even before Eddie Murphy, you had George Carlin, who was Irish. You admired him a great deal, didn't you? Go down to the bitter end and see George Carlin?
I did. I saw George Carlin when I was in my teens. I snuck in one night. And well, George Carlin is kind of like the godfather of the new observational humor. You can ask Jerry Seinfeld where, how did he start? I watched George Carlin. They watched George Carlin. He was the start of this new movement called observational humor.
Is there a common thread in all of this that so many of the comics, particularly the ethnic comics, on the outside of society looking in? I mean, you had Lenny Bruce said, if you live in New York, even if you're Catholic, you're Jewish. You see you laughing. Chris Rock said, yeah, I love being famous. It's almost like being white, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a parallel there, isn't there?
Well, being famous. I think it's about being famous. There's something that happens when you are famous. The perception of being famous and the perception of being funny all helps build the persona of the person. When you're perceived to be funny, that's when you start to sell out shows. It's just something that happens. And in this day of celebrity, it's all about celebrity, you know that. So.
Well, there's also an irreverence to comedy, isn't there? That you sort of, it's the individual against the government, the individual against society. Dick Gregory, down south, they don't care how close I am as long as I don't get too big. Up north, they don't care how big I am as long as I don't get too close.
He was brilliant, wasn't he? I worked a lot with Dick Gregory.
Inside out humor, and it kind of makes us think a little bit.
Poignant. It's poignant and smart. It's groundbreaking. It's comedians are some of the smartest people that I've ever met in my entire life. I give so much credit to being able to write this kind of material, put it down, get on stage and present it. I just admire comedians. There's just a real brilliance about them.
And, you know, there's a parallel with, there's the blasphemy of Lenny Bruce. All right, let's admit it, we Jews killed Christ, but it was only for 3 days. Every day people are straying away from the church and going back to God. If God made the body and the body is dirty, then the fault lies with the manufacturer.
Yeah, I mean, he was right on target, wasn't he?
Yeah.
We have a young man today, Dave Chappelle, who's followed in those kind of steps and can analyze the society just like that. And he's pretty compelling. And I started working with him when he was like 18 years old. He was up from Washington, D.C. And I have quite fond memories of working with Dave. But Dave Chappelle is one of those people, just like Lenny Bruce, that can take what's going on, analyze it, twist it, and turn it inside out and make it funny.
Do you think comics go too far in criticizing religion or in, you know, using swear words? I mean, George Carlin had his 7 famous swear words, and
it was poignant.
Not offensive.
It was poignant. It made sense. For the sake of using a curse to use a curse, no. But in the right context, of course, it's right.
Now, Robin Williams always found humor in improbability. It was amazing. I mean, he had a shtick, 2 Jews walk into a bar. People laugh. What's so funny about that? Because improbable, or he'd say, well, you know, just think. He said, Pavarotti at the Improv. It's unthinkable, and you think about it. And is that part of comedy too?
Of course, but he was a wonderful talent. We miss him. He was a great man. Gave a lot of his time to charity. He was a wonderful individual and one of the funniest people ever around. Always on like that. Always brilliant.
I remember seeing him on the West Side, just walking on the street, yelling jokes. at everybody who passed by. I mean, he was always working it. What about
Working it, but a trained actor. Went to
yeah,
Juilliard. Was a trained actor, a wonderful actor also.
what about material? Do comics write their own material typically, or do they have gag writers who write it for them?
Yeah, most write their own material. It comes from their soul. It's part of their being. It's part of their persona. Yeah, you could have some gag writing. I think Joan Rivers used to buy some jokes here and there, but it was basically Joan, who would take the joke. It was about her. It's not about anybody else writing your jokes.
What did she used to say? Exclusive country club. Even the waiting lists have waiting lists.
She was a breakthrough woman, let me
Yeah.
tell you. That was a woman that had tenacity and worked really hard and worked up until the day she died.
What about insulting people? I mean, Joan Rivers was a master of insult. I mean, taking on celebrities. Liz Taylor has more chins than the Hong Kong telephone directory was one of her famous lines.
So she crossed the line and she took her chances. It was her persona. Comedians find that they need to be out there. That's what made her her. Is those insults that she did so brilliantly. And when you hold back or you try to change your comedy for the sake of maybe who's buying it or who's producing it, then you see it just falls flat. You have to stay true to what your comic mind tells you to do.
Now, you go back to ancient Greece, and comedy consisted of political satire, taking on the government. And certainly in the era of Donald Trump, there's no shortage of things to satirize and to be funny about. I mean, you in your New Year's card, you have the only time Donald Trump says "pardon me" after January 20 is if he needs someone to get out of his way. And then, of course, wanting to be nonpartisan or bipartisan, you say, let's have the dedicated daily nap for Joe Biden. Why is political satire so pointed and necessary?
I think that, political satire kind of started more into that in late 70s, early 80s is when it started. And then surely with the birth of the Daily Show, that really made political comedy just bloom. And I think, Jon Stewart did it so brilliantly when he hosted the show. It helps us. It helps us through. Like, you laughed when I talked about the pardon about Donald Trump. You laughed about it. It made you feel better. You understand that Joe Biden is an older president and he might fall asleep. I was watching Bill Maher the other night, and Bill was saying he was watching the inauguration and trying to figure out how he was going to come up with jokes about Joe Biden. And the first joke that came out was about him falling asleep during the inauguration. So, I mean, we'll see what happens during this administration, but there's always something that, the comics will find funny and put out there.
What about the banality of our daily lives? I mean, Mark Twain said, everyone talks about the weather, but no one can do anything about it. Well, George Carlin used to satirize the weatherman. And he said, tonight's forecast, mostly dark, changing to widely scattered light tomorrow morning. Or tonight, an Indian rain dance. Pause. Weather. So comedy has its place there too. I mean, my gosh, otherwise we'd be trapped in a weather forecast.
Well, I mean, there it is, another mundane situation that people are making fun of. It's just, comedy is all about our daily lives. So pretty easy to make fun of that.
And as to Carlin's 7 curse words, he used to say his dirty words. He said, I can't repeat them here, but he used to say, they'll infect your soul, curve your spine, and keep the country from winning the war. It was really quite wonderful. What about politically incorrect comedy? Do you feature that as well? I mean,
I,
racist comedy?
you know, no, absolutely not. Um, sometimes a joke may be politically incorrect, but it may make a point. And I think in those instances, it's allowed. If the politically incorrect joke is for some sort of change to make things better, I think it's allowed then. And I think it's accepted then. Um, I've never, I don't think well, I haven't really ever told a comedian that he couldn't tell a joke. But if there are things that are racist or things that are constantly politically incorrect, they wouldn't be working for us anyway. That just wouldn't happen.
Now, there are two other activities that with which you've been associated, which are very interesting. The first is a school for comics, for amateur comics, and you've sponsored a school. Can comedy be taught? I mean, could you just take someone out of the blue and make them into a stand-up comedian after they've gone to school?
Well, we have a school at Caroline's, and one of our teachers there, Linda, she was a stand-up comedian. She's a stand-up comedian and also a producer and writer. So what you learn at the school is about writing jokes, how to get your right punchline, and how to deliver. You can be on stage practicing a joke, but maybe if you change a word or two around, it delivers better. And that's what we teach to people. And we have a school, we have classes, we have graduation, people all come together, they get to be on stage at Caroline's and to do their, 6 minutes of their new act that they put together at the school. It has to be in you to make comedy, to want to be in the business, but you can learn different elements of it, especially the delivery and especially joke writing.
Now, the other thing is in 2004, you started something that is quite unique, which is the New York Comedy Festival. And it's a week-long festival, 150 shows, 200 comics. Now, that's been suspended because of COVID as well, hasn't it?
That was suspended last November. We usually do it at the first 2 weeks in November.
And what's the venue? Is it Carnegie Hall or something?
Oh, it's all over. It's Madison Square Garden, it's Carnegie Hall, it's Town Hall, it's venues in Brooklyn, it's venues all over. We had over 150 shows, clear and all over town. So big headliners, at Madison Square Garden. This year, we are planning the festival to be in November. Hopefully, we will be through. We'll get through some of, we'll get rid of, dealing with being sick and dealing with the pandemic, hopefully in November, as we are planning to do the festival then.
And where do you think you're going to have it?
Oh, it's all over. It's all over New York City.
Oh, so
it's from small venues in Brooklyn to small venues in Manhattan, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Staten Island, to Carnegie Hall, to Madison Square Garden, to the Beacon Theater, to Town Hall. It's all over.
So on a given day, while the festival is going on, there might be 5 or 6 venues where there are comic performances.
Absolutely. There's even more. Sometimes there's 15 different shows going on in a night all over town.
And
we're very proud of the festival, and we are planning to do it this year in November.
what's the maximum audience you've had for the festival?
At Madison Square Garden, 15,000 people.
15?
No, actually 19,000 people at a show for Dane Cook about 10 years ago. 19,000 people for one show, and we did 2 shows in that day. So it was 38,000 people came out to see Dane Cook at one point in the festival.
Carolyn Hirsch, I have a question for you. And the question is, what do you see as your legacy? What are people going to say about Carolyn Hirsch and Carolyn's on Broadway in 50 years, in 100 years?
Oh, God. Well, let's see. I hope we're still going to live events. Listen, live events have been going on since the beginning of time, from amphitheaters to going to Madison Square Garden. I think that they'll show that, that people came to the club and had a really good time. I mean, I get notes from people that said, oh, I went on my first date there, and I took my wife there. We have such fond memories of the club early on. I saw this one or that one there. I saw Jerry Seinfeld before he was a star. I saw Bill Burr I saw Kevin Hart there before he was a star. I think Caroline's will go down as being a fun place to go to and people having a good time, and they'll remember that.
Well, I want to say I didn't have my first date there, but I took my wife there and we had a very, very good time. And so I can't wait till you open again and we're all back in Caroline's. Thank you so much for coming by. And thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations. I'm Jim Zirin. Take care, be safe, and all the best.